Back, fellow patriots. My name is Adam, and today we're talking about why teachers are walking out in mass from all of these school districts across the United States. I will see you on the other side. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are going to take a dive in to we're going to do some reactions. We're going to watch together some YouTube clips talking about some of the problems that we're seeing all across the United States in regards to the education. Now, to lay a little bit of a precedent, I'll tell you my personal experience before we dive into the reaction video. First of all, I grew up in a Section 8 neighborhood, very poor, low income housing. Um, my parents struggled to make ends meet, and my dad worked a sales position, so he was gone most of the time out of the house. He was gone for long periods of time, and every penny that they earned, they used to try to send us to a private school because they realized that the public education system, even at that time in San Antonio, was not up to the standard of what they wanted for their children. And so we went to a private Christian school at the behest of my parents, and the school was rather rigorous. The academics were very challenging, and their standards for discipline were very high. And I remember the one time getting into trouble, like just having an absolute fear of having to go to the principal's office because I knew that if my parents got a call home that I would absolutely be disciplined. Now, my parents were very corporal punishment heavy, and they did not have a really well balanced discipline, like a methodology behind it. And yet I still turned out as a fairly respectful man, respectful to my teachers especially. So I'll just put that out there up front that my parents weren't perfect, but they at least got some things right. And one of them was putting the fear of God in me, that if I messed up at school, that there was a price to pay. And I remember walking into the principal's office the one time that I got in trouble when I was in school. And I remember seeing the paddle up on the wall that the principal had access to and could use if he wanted to. I mean, there were abuses in our history, and we steered away from corporal punishment in our education environments, from teachers being able to use physical corporal punishment on their students. There were abusive people that used their power to essentially beat children into submission. And so, of course, that's why we steered away from it as a society. Like my dad, he went to a Catholic school, and he used to call them the penguins, but they would rap you on the knuckles um, for getting out of line in class, and the whole dunce cap in the corner of the room. So yeah, like some of these tactics probably maybe weren't the best as far as from a perspective outside looking in. Nowadays, parents would absolutely be rioting and storming the Capitol if a principal had a paddle in his office. Uh, but yeah, I just put that up front that before we start watching these and doing some reaction videos, I wanted to share with you at least some of my how I was raised, and that translated into the same thing in high school. I mean, I respected my teachers. I never acted out against them. Of course, cell phones weren't around at that point in time, so there was really nothing else to do other than to try to check out girls, get distracted from the books, stare out the window. I mean, that was the only real distractions that I had. And even then, the teachers were very demanding, and I appreciated that. I went to a school in Pennsylvania called Crestwood, and I went to a public school. when I was 13, we moved to Pennsylvania and we ended up going to a public school system, and they were really good. Great teachers. They were supported really well by their school board. They were paid really well. They were paid probably in the top percentile of school districts in the area. Of course, the area itself was more of a middle class up type of environment. My dad worked really hard to try to work us into a situation where they could put us in a better living area that would send us to a better school. And that was, we rented for a while and stayed in a small townhouse for a while just so that we could stay in that school district. That's how important my parents put the quality of our education. And it wasn't just the actual education, but also the quality of the teachers. They knew what school district they wanted their kids in. We had looked at areas surrounding surrounding the area, Dallas, Wyomissing. They looked in a couple different areas behind the scenes, and then they ended up deciding on Mountaintop, which was where I went to school. So, I just put that out there that there are public schools out there that do support their teachers. We'll get into that a little bit. I want to pause that part of the story, and then let's jump and take a look at and react to some of these. And again, because I'm using Zoom as my share, some of these, the video is going to be a little bit delayed. You're not going to see a full video, but you'll hear the audio. So I'm just going to jump in here, and we're going to watch a couple of them, and then we'll react.
I'm having a heart attack. I'm having a heart attack.
I started having nosebleeds. I never had a nosebleed.
And I just felt like everything was choking. I was like, what's going on?
I had increased anxiety medicine, depression medicine.
And the doctor came in, he goes, "Are you under a lot of stress?" And I'm like, "No." He goes, "What do you do?" I go, "I'm a teacher." He goes, "Yes, you are."
These are the stories of 6 North Texas teachers.
We represent different grade levels. We represent different ISDs.
They do have one thing in common. They all recently quit.
It takes a toll.
I could not do it anymore.
The job can feel like a calling.
Growing up, my mom was a teacher.
Okay, so we got a bunch of ex-teachers. They all quit, and now they're about to give their background on how they started, what they wanted to do in life. Let's fast forward a little bit and to hear a little more.
Raise your hand if you feel like you made a difference in kids' lives.
Well, that's good.
So stepping away wasn't exactly easy.
I mean, I can't do that anymore, but that's where my heart is.
And I just cried because I thought, that's my last group of kids.
The Texas Education Agency reports more than 13% of the state's teachers, nearly 50,000 of them, left the profession last year, the highest number on record.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna stop for a second there. I think that's alarming. I think it's very alarming. We as a nation depend on the adults to raise children up in the way that they should go. It's our jobs as parents to teach our children respect, healthy boundaries, good communication, and to have discipline for themselves enough to pay attention in school. Personally, this is just my own. I was undiagnosed with many mental health troubles. I lived in a very toxic family system. I had major issues with attention and focus, and yet my mother put my nose to the grindstone anyway and forced me to have to work through those issues with attention. I think I had undiagnosed ADHD, but I also had something that I think was constant trauma in the household, which contributes to folks who may potentially have signs of ADHD. Sometimes you look at PTSD and the symptoms of a PTSD and ADHD, they mirror each other a lot, and it's hard to distinguish. But I had a lot of trouble focusing in school, and I had a lot of behaviors of acting out of impulsivity. So It's a problem. It's a problem. Let's take a look. Let's see if there's more that we can find out.
There's more than just one reason, this group told us, for the exodus. But a good starting point is the money, or better said, the lack of it.
Oh, and I know I didn't get into it for the money. I know.
All right, so we already know that that's a problem. I'm going to fast forward a little bit.
To look at how to improve teacher recruitment and retention. Topping its list of recommendations released this February was a significant increase in overall teacher salaries. But state lawmakers failed during their regular session.
Yeah, so we know that they failed. Let's see what else.
Even your all, and then like, but don't you know God?
Oh, yeah.
But don't you know God?
We studied all 160 bills proposed this year that would have affected teachers. Most never made it to a vote. And in the end, not a single one of the task force recommendations became law. We asked this group about several measures the legislature did pass and whether they thought they'd make a difference, like more money for retired teachers.
Possibly, yeah.
All right, I want to pause that and let's skip to another one. I want to skip to this guy. This gentleman was telling his story on why he left the school that he did. You can see my post here from one of my YouTube channels. I just said, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll make a video about it on my Patriot podcast.
Welcome back to another AV show. And, as I'm driving, I've been doing a lot of thinking. And I finally made up my mind that I'm not going to come back as a teacher or even as a sub next year, because the fact of the matter is our school system is just going down the tubes. It's unfortunate because my whole life I wanted to be a teacher. I got my master's degree in teaching, but when I actually became a teacher, I saw...
Yeah, so common threads. You see people who are getting into the education system, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, being taught and told that... I want to summarize some of what he's talking about. I don't want to watch and react to the entire video. But a lot of common factors that I'm seeing in these videos that I'm reacting to is they're all coming into this and going into these bachelor's and master's degrees in teaching, being told that they get to make a difference in the world. And so that's their heart's desire. They want to educate, lead children, and teach them how to learn, teach them how to be better people. Because ultimately, it's not the facts and the logic that you teach them. It's the lessons that they've learned about how they can transplant what they're being told and what they're hearing and seeing into a viable tool for that individual to become a productive member of society. Is that not the purpose of our education, is to equip and train our children up in the way that they should go? His perspective, and I'm just going to kind of summarize what he had said here about halfway through. He said that basically he felt like I'll share the screen here. This gentleman here said that he basically felt like a glorified babysitter, that he had no support from his school district when he tries to get his students in class to listen. Essentially, they were being ignored, disrespected. And then when he sent them to the principal's office, then he got in trouble from his own administration for trying to discipline the children. So to summarize up his message, he basically said, I'm quitting at the end of the year. I was misled. I don't feel like this is worth the stress, because he's working even outside of the parameters of the hours that he has to be in school. He's always constantly trying to improve the curriculum. Even during Christmas and the summer, he's having to do extra work just to make ends meet because he's not making enough money. That's the summary of his message. Now, this guy, I didn't listen to the whole thing here. Let's jump in here. Another former teacher.
It's a Friday, and it was around 10:30, and I'm in this meeting with my principal, assistant principal, and the other advisor that I was teaching with. The meeting was a disaster. It was a train wreck, off the rails. I'm in the meeting just looking around, just like, is this the real world? I'm wondering, is this really happening? I'm looking over here and my buddy has got his head in his hands and nobody's looking at each other in the eyes. It was crazy. But what I did is I got a lot of clarity. I had realized that I could walk away at that moment, and that I had to walk away at that moment if I wanted to sleep again. Because for almost 6 months that school year, I had barely slept. So that meeting was a revelation. The angels were actually singing, the clouds were opening, and I was like, I can quit. I can now quit. And I went downstairs, I went to my room, and I typed up my resignation. I had already brought most of my stuff home like 2 months ago because I was thinking about quitting multiple times because it was such a horrible situation.
Okay, so I do so his message is another reflection of what we're hearing across the board from multiple people. And I'm just getting these from YouTube. Like I'm just watching these videos of teachers talking about their experiences from YouTube. Let's rewind and go back and read some of the comments of these on these videos, because I feel like the comment section is always rich with information. Let's go back to the Texas teachers and read below that. All right, so fill in 5703 says, my father is a retired teacher. He committed himself 100% to be the best that he could be. I remember him falling asleep at the kitchen table while grading homework and creating teaching plans after dinner, and up at 5 a.m. to prepare for the long day and commute to work. He did a summer's master's degree course to improve his skills and be a better support for our family. God bless you, all of you teachers who are struggling with current problems in society. All right. Zwick 6890. Again, these are anecdotal because they're, there's no names, ages, and schools attached to these, but I mean, you have to kind of like trust that these people are just telling us the truth. Why else would they comment on these videos unless they felt connected with this problem? Zwick 6890 says, I've taught for 30 years. The majority of my problems have come from students who are messed up at home, and parents with no time for them, and people outside of the classroom and or school who have no idea what is really going on in education. I saw a big change in behaviors when everyone got phones, tablets, and social media. So let's pause and talk about that for a moment. Kids don't need phones. They should not be allowed to have phones. There's absolutely no reason why children should have phones. And in fact, this was one of the biggest issues that ended up happening at the end of my relationship with my ex-wife. She always had a phone. Even from the time that she was young, she always was connected to the phone. She couldn't get off the phone. Again, and I said that she has narcissistic qualities, but that's how the narcissistic spirit gets transmitted through. And what it does is it crashes your dopamine system. The more that you're stuck on your phone, the more it rewires the brain for quick impulse and emotional dysregulation, lack of self-control, and lack of self-discipline is essentially what these phones and tablets have done. I mean, I don't have the studies literally right in front of me to show how exactly that works. This is an anecdotal, but what I'm telling you is what I know. This is not just an anecdotal observation. This is just truth. This is facts. When children are given phones, it destroys their regulation systems. And especially for young men, it is terrible because as young growing men, they need to be able to learn self-discipline and how to self-regulate. And using phones and tablets has only made that process much more difficult. We're essentially creating ADHD vicariously by giving these kids phones. I don't, and this is just my opinion, but parents, it's easy. I know I had 5 kids. It's much easier to hand your kid a tablet and watch and have them entertain themselves than it is to try to parent your kids. Let's just be real. Let's be honest about this. It's so much easier. And the more kids that we had, the more easy it was to fall for that temptation as a parent to just hand them a tablet. And I was fighting against that temptation for a very long time, 10 plus years in my parenting career. And it just, like, when I had an ex that, I mean, when we worked together on issues and we're agreeing on issues, things worked out better for our kids. I liked implementing a positive behavior system at home. I implemented something that I had learned in my own master's degree program in counseling. I learned it in a class about kids and education and play therapy. Using a positive reward behavior system and a token economy to reward kids for making positive choices and emphasizing more of what you want to see, and also correcting when they make a mistake. But the emphasis is more on the positive. To me, that PBIS, I don't have a problem with PBIS, but it has to be supported. PBIS is just the primary modality for behavioral transformation in schools. That's the primary thing that all these schools are being indoctrinated with and told that this is what they have to use to raise kids, essentially, because the teachers are having to be glorified babysitters, and the parents at home are screwing things up. Like, they're not teaching kids how to actually be respectful, to have self-discipline. A lot of these kids have phones. They could care less about their teacher. And of course, when you're a young kid like that, you want attention. So the more you act out and get away with it, any attention is good attention for kids. And if there's no discipline on the back end, what you're teaching them is that those behaviors are okay. That's what you're teaching those kids, that there's no consequence for their behaviors. So you see that the spirit of narcissism truly is at play with, even in our education system. I talked yesterday in my video about why I love my enemies and how God has illuminated to me that the spirit of narcissism has truly infected many different areas of our consciousness. And that's in politics, that's in businesses, media, legacy medias, obviously our schools, our VA, our military. Like, it's infected everything. And to me, this is just a symptom of the greater issue at hand here, is that there's truly no vision, no consistent vision for how we should be raising up our children across the board. Parents are distracted, kids are distracted. School boards, let's talk about that for a second. So any government system tries to become pervasive, meaning they try to increase themselves. The more schools have enrollment, the bigger they get, the more funding they get. So that's the facts. Their primary goal is to be self-fulfilling, to get as many kids enrolled and push as many kids into classrooms as possible. Generally speaking, that's how one way that schools are funded, by their enrollment numbers. It's like they're fighting for kids to come to their school district so that they can get more funding from the federal government. I don't think that's right. Number two, the woke, only positive encouragement behavior methodology to try to encourage kids to become better people doesn't work by itself. What do we know? What does the Bible say? It says, train up a child in the way that they should go. Correcting a child when they're young will help them become wise as an adult. That's what the Bible says. It's a prescription. So once we took discipline, true discipline, out of the schools, then we removed, because there's two hands that raise a child, one of discipline and one of love and encouragement. You need both of those hands working together to raise up a child. A hand of discipline, which is like a teaspoon of correction, and a teaspoon of love and care and encouragement. You mix that two together, and then that's how you get quality citizens growing up. But we don't have that anymore. We lost that. And the education, the Ministry of Education, if you want to call it that, in the United States, at least from my understanding, for the last several directors of our education in our country, they've missed the mark. They've really missed the mark. And there's really seems to be no connection between these people that were putting in office that put these stupid curriculum policies and all these measures that are in place for schools to have to try to fulfill, and the actual reality of what's happening in a classroom. So let's continue to read some of these comments. Chantal Hall says, as a student, I hated most of my teachers and I was what was considered a bad student. My attitude, grades, and self-esteem were garbage. That being said, I still never disrespected my teachers the way kids do now. That girl that pepper sprayed her teacher because he took her phone because she was using it to cheat lost his job. It's insane to me how shitty of a person you have to be to assault your teachers. Yeah, we have that problem too. Let's see if there's another one. I taught, so Lane DC 9HD 2 weeks ago says, I taught in Texas for about 10 years. I'll give you a few reasons why and other teachers left teaching. The principals go and hide if they don't want to be bothered. The students are so disrespectful, you almost have to threaten if they hit you, you will knock them out. Then, of course, you get child abuse cases for just defending yourself. Then you have a felony and can never get another decent job. Send these grown kids to the office and they'll send them back with a pat on the back, candy, and tell you that you have to deal with it. There are middle school teacher cliques that will exclude you and talk about you if you don't hang out or party with them. I've had to hold my going to the bathroom over hours because no one came to watch my class. I've run multiple lesson plans, staying late at school for these lesson plans. I had normal blood pressure, but felt one day I was going to have a stroke. I've had to go into the hallway to get air after being called multiple names by students just for asking for their homework. You really go into teaching to help students, but the system is set up to help them fail, and you're just a casualty along the way. They ought to let teachers that have actually taught for years in classrooms set the agendas and rules for school. I left Texas in teaching 2 years ago for customer service, and I'm happy I did. Texas will continue to lose teachers and students will continue to go downhill. And the bottom line is that we as a country will suffer. And I predict that the US will be the most backwards, uneducated country on the planet. All right, let's take a look at the comments from this guy who left school. DC LAD Clate 1135 says, I hear you. I quit after 30 years. The first 10 years were joyous. The last 20 required me to say my prayers every night to make it through the next day. No joke. Schools need to start disciplining these kids who run or ruin the learning for the kids who actually want to learn. Pay teachers what you value them as. Parents, back your teachers because many of you are creating disrespectful, irresponsible monsters. This one got 2.6 likes. 2.6K. I hit the like button on this one. What did I hit it for? My dad had a friend for over 20 years who also decided teaching was his calling and became a middle school teacher. Very quickly, his enthusiasm was dampened by the grim realities of it all. There was one kid in particular who caused the most grief of all of his students. He basically told the kid, don't bother coming into class anymore. This, of course, got back to the administrators who were going to discipline him, but before they could, he happened to quit and left the field. The harsh reality is some kids are unteachable, and only hope of being motivated to learn is when the consequences of their poor life decisions come back to haunt them. These school districts stripping teachers of their ability to administer appropriate consequences for bad behavior is not doing any of these kids favors. Yeah, so I hit the like button on that one, and I agree with that. What else did I agree with? The schools are a reflection of society. Amen. Preach it. American society seems to shift from one extreme to the other. Yes, they do. Common sense gets lost everywhere. Yes, it does. I remember sending my child to school in a uniform that was supposedly required, only to find out she was the only person wearing one. When I asked the administration about this, I was informed that parents objected so strongly that the dress code was enforced. This happened at 2 different schools. I don't know what happened to respectful, decency, honesty, discipline, etc. A society with no morals will not last. Last but not least, let's read the comments underneath Jared Z's why I quit teaching for 18 years after 18 years. I hit the like on a lot of these. As one of your previous students, I can confirm that they suffered a loss when you walked out, man. Good for you though. God, glad you freed yourself. That one got 6.4K likes. There's no teacher shortage. There's a shortage of respect and proper compensation for teachers. Mad respect for you. Prayers emoji. 2.5K likes. I hit the like on that one. The issue isn't enough pay, insurance, or whatever. I'm a teacher. It's the horrible parents who won't discipline their kids or teach them the importance of respect and hard work. I definitely hit the like button on that. All right. So enough with that. Enough of that for now. We are going to look at some of the common things that I pick up from video. Number one, this is what I wrote down. Most common complaints of teachers leaving their jobs: disrespect and little to no support from their principal or school board administration. Number two, money, not paid enough for the work that they do. Number three, students not being taught discipline at home, glorified babysitters without proper support from the parents. So there's a disconnect between the student's behavior, the consequences in school, and the teacher's ability to be able to reinforce quality morals and ethics in the student educational environment. A major problem. All right, so let's talk about some of the ideas that God gave me for making changes wholesale in our country. These are ideas for consideration. First of all, as I had mentioned before, I had already mentioned that there are school districts out there that do have exemplary results with their teaching, with the quality of their education, as well as improved markers for better behavior, increased attendance, and better relationship between the student and the teacher. And here's why. All right. So this is actually number 4 on my redesigning the school system list. We'll get to that in a minute. I'll make that connection in parallel with why I think we need to increase funding for this particular program. Number 1, I think we need to start considering the idea of having a gender specific education curriculum. I think we need to re-examine having boys and girls in the same class, and here's why, especially as teenagers. It might not be such a problem when you're the ages from 3 to 10, 4 to 10, whatever that is. That time system, that time range, no problem. However, as soon as girls and boys start hitting puberty, oh boy, things start to change real quick. Girls are all about gossip and all about the drama and all about who's dating who and who's girlfriend with who, and all the cliques start to develop. And then you see the boys acting out to try to get girls' attention and trying to have their own little pissing contests to see who would actually be, the coolest in the class. You know what? Let's talk about pissing contests for a minute. This just demonstrates to you the difference between boys and girls. When I was in school, we literally used to have pissing contests in the bathroom. We would go in the bathroom and we would stand as far back from the urinal as we can to see who could piss the farthest. That's how boys are. And, that was even in a private Christian school that we were doing that. So, I'm just saying, like, boys are different than girls, and we have to be able to respect that. There needs to be a respect for the differences between how boys and girls learn in classroom environments and how they learn in the world and how they need to be raised. I believe that boys, especially, and young growing men need to have a more hands-on curriculum. They need to have the opportunity, and I put this as my number 7, to increase trades and apprenticeship programs. So if you have a school that has a strong VOTEC program, we need to be considering adding a significant more amount of funding for these vocational schools, increase the number of programs that these kids can get access to, and make it so that these kids can apprentice even while they're in school, and they can even work towards earning their degree, getting a parallel, not only either their GED or their high school, because you need to have a goal. You need to have a realistic, attainable goal that men can look at, especially young boys, and actually know that they're working towards something that's going to actually help their life. Because right now, the convolution of this secular education system that is essentially lying to them, telling them that if they go to school and they attend school, that they'll get a high school degree, and if they're good enough boys and girls, that they can get into college, and that if they get into college and do well in college, that there's a wonderful world waiting to offer them a job. Well, wake up. That ain't how it is. And I was one of them that went all the way up into a doctorate program, and I was chasing the hamster wheel of success as a professional counselor, hindered by my own struggles mentally, but still, like, at the end, when I found out that there was little to no promise for a actual future in my field, unless I became like a business owner of an agency, that would be the only way that I could actually afford my family. I felt absolutely misled. I thought that just by looking up, like, I did my own research before I started a master's program, looking at salary indicators for counselors and school counselors, because that's initially what I wanted to be. And it looked promising. It looked promising to become a guidance counselor or a school counselor. But the longer I was in that program, the more I realized school counselors are also basically glorified babysitters, and they don't get paid enough for what they do. So there's a disconnect between what we're promising these young, aspiring, bushy-tailed college students who are going to school, learning all about how to understand kids and understand curriculum development, and then go on to even improve themselves in a master's in teaching program. And they spend all this money, and they are absolutely saddled with, $100,000 in debt, sometimes $150,000 in debt to basically indentured servitude for the next 25 to 30 years of their life. And they're forced then to have to take teaching jobs that will either accelerate paying off their debt or put them in situations where they basically have to work to pay their own student loans. It's a backward system. It's not working right now, and it won't work. And so I think we as a nation truly need to actually re-examine and have a healthy dialogue and discussion with people who have been teachers for years, people who have developed curriculums and understand the differences between, and respectively understand the difference between boys and girls. Because I do believe that we need to really re-examine what we're doing and how we're actually structuring the school day. Think about it. They come into school, they eat school breakfast, or they sit in a classroom for 30 minutes to do the attendance, whatever this is. And then they're like, you go into classroom and you have to sit and try to pay attention for almost 45 minutes straight to 50 minutes straight. And coming from somebody who had undiagnosed mental health struggles and struggled to focus in class, I was always looking under my desk and looking at everybody else and picking my nose. And like, I was not your typical student. And yet I still learned the material that I needed to learn, but I had to learn it through repetition. I had to relearn. I had to learn in a more difficult way than other students. Other students could just pay attention and pick up things. I had a learning disability that was undiagnosed, and I stressed the heck out of myself, and I had to go home and do flashcards and study. I had to work twice as hard as everybody else to learn the material that I had to learn. And that's been a constant issue in my life, is that, in the past, it was so easy for me to forget people's names and forget the material that I just read, and I'd have to read it over and over and over again in order for me to absorb the material. I'm different than other people, so I had a harder time when it comes to education. But you know, when I envision what my children are going through and being involved in a school system that's promising them that if they graduate high school that they'll have a better opportunity to make it work in life. Is that a true promise now? Really? Look at our economy. Is that really truly what's happening in the world? No, I don't think so. And I think that if you look at the reality of it is, if you were, and this is how the Amish work too, by the way, once they reach a certain age, they can read and write. They know enough of algebra, they know enough of geometry, they know enough of English, and then they start them in a trade apprenticeship type situation where they then learn as an understudy to learn construction or engineering or plumbing or roofing or whatever. They learn an actual trade skill, and then they go and they apprentice underneath people who are actively doing it. I think we really need to heavily look at that and offer that for men, for young boys growing. I think we really truly need to offer something where it's like a split day. You do and truly make that the hallmark for our education, instead of forcing kids to have to meet these ridiculous standards for stupid stuff that they're never ever going to use in their future. Make it so that, yeah, they get the base of understanding of what they need to know. Sure, it's good to know US history. It's good to know that your country was founded on certain principles. Good. They need to have basics. They need to read and write. They need to understand geometry, and they need to understand literature and how to write. Yes, good. Fine, no problem. But then there needs to be something that they literally have to implement right then during that day, halfway through the day. Then they start doing whatever apprenticeship they're sent off then to go work towards their trade skill and or their apprenticeship. And that's what they should do for the remainder of the day. And they shouldn't have phones. They absolutely should not have phones at all, period. So let me finish rewriting these or reading these. Number 2, I wrote mandatory daily exercise in the morning. I think we need to implement, honestly, play is how kids work through trauma. That's what I learned. Gary Landreth is a popular person in the play therapy field, and that's true. I think in ages kindergarten through 6th grade, yeah, that sounds appropriate. We need to have longer periods of recess time without phones, no tablets, nothing electronic, because these kids can work through many issues in their life by play. Play is how kids work. And it's tragic because my own daughter had a learning disability. She had issues with memory retention, and she really struggled. And so she ended up missing a lot of her recesses because she would have to sit back in the classroom and redo her work all the time. Like, at some point, we have to look at these issues and recognize that these kids need exercise, and they need to play, and they need to go out and have fun. At the same time, they need to do it without the assistance of some type of stupid device that's going to make them sit there and stare at a screen for half an hour, 45, or have to be so stuck to their phone that they're waiting for a reply from Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, Facebook, social medias, memes, laughing at stuff. Like, kids have to be trained how to self-regulate. And the only way to do that is to remove these electronic devices from their possession. Why? Explain to me rationally why kids should ever have phones during a school day. The only one that makes sense is my son, who has type 1 diabetes, because he gets readings on his blood sugars constantly through his blood sugar device, and that's attached to his phone. That's a rare exception. Now, of course, you can use devices that are not a phone to get your blood sugar levels, and so that's probably an accommodation that you would have to consider. But at the same time, there's very rare exceptions why kids should ever have phones in school, ever. Why? After curriculum, like after school, fine, no problems. You want to reconnect with your friends and read all of your Snapchats and all the stupid stuff that you could have been looking at throughout the day, fine, no problem. But when you're in school, you're on school time. There's a job for you to do. And it's to prepare yourself for future life, because nobody's doing you any favor by handing you a tablet and keeping you entertained for however long that's into entertaining you. That's a disservice to you. So there absolutely needs to be stronger penalties for kids using their phones. There should absolutely be no kids having phones throughout the school day. None. Zip. Zero. There's no reason. You're never going to convince me. And that was the problem I had at the end of my relationship with my prior wife, was I didn't want these kids to have phones. And I never felt like it was really appropriate for them to have tablets either. And I struggled with gaming addiction. That's what I went to as a kid. I loved playing games, of course. I could play games for hours, 16 hours, 17 hours straight. Sometimes I've played video games for almost 24 hours straight before. Toxic. So you have to have a strong parenting system that will advocate for kids having limitations on access to electronics. It's just a fact. Number 3 is what I wrote down: standard disciplinary rules and enforcement across all schools. Kids need to know what the rules are, and they need to have enforcement for those rules across all schools. It needs to be there needs to be a consistency. No matter what school you go to, you need to know what the disciplinary rules are and how they're going to be enforced. If it's not enforced across the board, you're just giving people a way to manipulate the system. The school boards and the school districts, you're a bunch of pussies. Like if you will not support your teachers, you don't deserve to be in administration. If you've never been in a situation where you had to choose between your own sanity and the health and the well-being of another person before, you don't belong in administration. And if it's been so long that you haven't had to sit with your teachers and learn and listen and know what it's like to be in their situation and in their risky situation where they're struggling every day to try to get kids to pay attention every day, then you don't belong being an administrator. You need to be replaced, probably by the teachers that have already quit, because they're going to do a better job than you will. Now, I say that, but at the same time, there are administrators out there, and I'll mention a school district where I think that they've got it right. Tyrone High School in Pennsylvania. It's near a place in Altoona, Pennsylvania, but Tyrone School District. They have a strong administration and a good relationship with their teachers. Their administrators work hand in hand because many of them were former teachers, if not all of them, and they know what it's like, and they work with their teachers. And the principal is more heavy-handed. Somebody has to be the bad guy. There always has to be a bad guy. It's just like good cops, bad cops. You got to have somebody who's a little bit more heavy-handed. You depend on that. And I was working in something called a CSBBH program, which was a mental health, behavioral health program, working in the school, like our mental health program. I was a master's level. I had bachelor's level people with me, and we would set up shop in a classroom. And any of the kids that we had on our caseload, usually they were kids that acted out in class the most. And it was our job to help them work through their issues. So but we depend, even us who tried to help those kids work through these behavioral issues, we needed to have the threat from the school that if these kids messed up, that there was consequences for their behaviors. Because if you didn't have that, then you can't have the nurturing side of the counseling stuff work. If all you do is the nurturing side of the counseling and the PBIS and all that, all you're doing is reinforcing their negative behaviors. So you have to have something on the other end that provides true consequence for their behaviors. And when you marry those two together, You're incentivizing the kid to make better choices. That's how PBIS should actually work. And so what I said, my thoughts and feelings about how we can positively impact our country is to implement CSBBH programs across the entire country. And focus on a lot of these poverty, low income families and help with their mental health, help make a connection between the parent at home and the school administrators. Like, we were acting as mediators. Many times when these kids would get in trouble, the first reaction, if they didn't have a mediator or a moderator or an advocate for their child, oftentimes what would happen is the school wouldn't know what's going on at home and they wouldn't be able to help that parent. They only see the symptom of what's going on in the classroom with their kid acting out. And it created this very an animosity, a disconnect between the parent at home and what they were actually going through. I'll give you an example. I had a mother who had 2 children. She was a single mother. She had a lot of trauma and a lot of abuse. She had many paranoid thoughts in her head, and she was extremely protective over her kids. And she would switch school districts from one to another if she didn't agree with what happened in that school district and the way that they treated her kids. She was ready to just yank them at any time, and that was her threat. That's how she managed things. Well, what do we know? That's a symptom of somebody who possibly has borderline personality. And I truly believe that that's what she had. I think she just overreacted in many situations without truly giving the school district time to work through those issues with her because they were just so busy with everything else. And she had no advocate in the school to help her kids in the moment. Like her son, for example, he had a lot of rage, and he would have episodes where he would just explode on himself in the middle of the classroom at a teacher, and he would explode and then leave the classroom. And it was my job to make sure that either I or my bachelor's level staff would go and find the kid that's out in the hallway and calm that student down, get him into our therapy room, work with them on the issue, identify the source of the trigger, figure out what caused the reaction, help them learn. And we would work through a program to help them understand why they acted the way that they acted. And then what we would do is we would follow up with the parent at home. I would literally I would leave the school and I would drive to the family and to the mother, and I would explain what happened so that she knew that the school wasn't against her. The teacher did not make a mistake. The teacher was just teaching something and asked him a legitimate to like be responsible for his behavior on something, like whatever it was, whether it was to stop talking or to stop interrupting other students while they're trying to learn. Like, the teacher was just doing their job. And so in the past, prior to having somebody who would advocate for them, prior to having somebody that, then there would be such a disconnect between what the teacher was seeing in the classroom, what the principal was hearing in the principal's office, what the child was telling the parent, because the child will manipulate the parent when they go home and try to make it seem like the teachers and the principals are the problem. And that's what would happen. You have all these gaps in between what actually the parents are hearing and what was actually happening in reality. And our job as a CSBBH program was to eliminate those gaps so that everybody could take accountability for what happened. The teacher would feel supported, because oftentimes what we would do is we would follow up after I would go home to talk to mom or dad. Most of the time it was a single mother, but I would go home, talk to the mother, literally drive to her house, come into the house, have a session with her, help her with whatever she was feeling in the moment about the issue, and come to a consensus about what she felt was important so that I could hear her voice, hear what she thought, and hear what her concerns were. And you know what? Many times, this is why I think that these CSBBH programs are so essential, because if you really truly get to the core of what a concerned mother's fear is, it's not so much that we can assume that parents just don't care about their kids, but in many ways, sometimes they have too many concerns. There are parents out there who are helicopter parents who try to control and create a bubble around their kid so that they don't experience the trauma that they experienced. And that's not a healthy way to live. So when I would go and I would work with these parents at home, I would help them understand that, like, yes, in the moment, you might get anxious about your son getting disciplined at school. I understand that. And it's okay, mother of whatever child you are. Like, it's okay to have that initial reaction. And sometimes she would react just like her son did. She would have episodes of like rage, and I would be there to help work through those issues. And it caused a lot of stress for me too. But at the end of the day, she knew that we were her advocate. She knew that we were the mediators that would go to the school and try to advocate for what she was saying. And then what would happen is sometimes if she didn't agree with even what we thought or what the school thought, we would set up a meeting between me, the principal, the teacher, her son, and her, so she could get in front of all these people, hear what they have to say, and come to a consensus. Not all the time did it work all perfectly. There were times when she had major emotional reactions, and that was what she was used to. She was so used to these explosive interactions, and she would say things that were very hurtful. And this is what borderline individuals really struggle with. She would say something very hurtful, but it was coming out of a place of fear of abandonment. And I feel that, like, for somebody who has been healing from something called quiet borderline personality disorder that I discovered later in life, like, I feel like I've come so far that my symptoms are almost undiagnosable now. It's like somebody who has HIV, who, after taking the course of their medications in their bloodstream, that it becomes undiagnosable. Like, you can't, there's not enough of that virus available to even make it recognizable. And in the same way, I've gotten to that point in my own mental health recovery. Thank God and praise God for that. But I recognized her symptoms in myself. And I noticed that it was her fears of abandonment from her prior traumas and relationships and her mental health struggles that she assumed that the school was out against her. And this school district, Tyrone, is an exemplary example of how well, when you have this mental health program, a buy-in to the CSBBH program, where they saw that the benefit to having these mediators and moderators between family and school, it alleviated the pressure that were on teachers to have to shoulder it all, to shoulder every single issue, and to try to be the objective party when that kid is acting out. They don't know exactly why that kid's acting out all the time. You can't necessarily assume that it's only just phones or puberty or hormones or whatever's going on, like disrespect. I mean, sure, we could throw that word out as like a trigger word and just say, oh, everybody just disrespects everybody. But maybe that's not always the case. Maybe there's something going on that a CSBBH program, a mental health program, that can come in and work with these students that are having major mental health troubles, and they're having troubles at home. The parents are having trouble. So I think we do need to examine that and look at that as a country, just to say, like, I think we actually have solutions to the problem available to us. And I'm encouraging and I'm highlighting that there are school districts, the one that I worked at, and I know there's other school districts that have worked really well with these CSBBH programs. And I've talked about this before on other episodes. But these mental health programs that are funded through the federal government to help assist and be a buffer to children who do have behavioral health issues. Because if it's a pattern of behavior, then it's diagnosable. If it's diagnosable, then it's a disability. If it's a disability, then you can treat it, and you can have an insurance program that will provide a mental health program for that child. So there are things out there working. Number 5, I wrote this down. No phones, period. Well, that's pretty simple. Number 6, I already talked about. Boys and young men should have more hands-on curriculum. Number 7, increase trade apprenticeships. Kids can work while earning a degree. I already talked about that. And number 8, increase funding for schools who meet disciplinary standards, not merely based on enrollment. I think that what we need to have is an inclusive mental health program across all schools, public schools. And I think the CSBBH programs need to be recognized nationwide as the best option for our as a middleman between the kids and the home. And it will take so much weight off of these teachers who are struggling, having to be the teacher, the disciplinarian, the manager, the curriculum developer, all the things. It will help alleviate that. Now, as far as teacher pay, yeah, I mean, we just spent $8 billion extra on a war in Ukraine. How many teachers across the United States could have earned a higher wage instead of that money being spent on ridiculous proxy wars and ridiculous payments? Now, I've talked about this before. I talked about this on a prior episode. It can't just be done in a vacuum. The United States in general, our government is so polluted by politics, greed, lust, narcissism, that it's going to take a radical transformation. You're going to have to elect a president who doesn't want to be president, who wants to work himself out of a job. And you can look at that episode prior to when I talked about that. Not only did I talk about the devaluation of the dollar, I talked about the problems with who we're electing as presidents. I've also talked about how to resolve those issues. And what I said is that we have power. We can vote anybody into the office that we want. They don't have to even be running for office, but you can vote for that person. You can write them in on the ballot. And if enough people find a person who meets enough criteria that they feel confident could lead this country to the promised land, then vote for that person. That's what I'm saying. That like there are people out there that God showed me that have, and I know that he told me that that's going to be one of my roles in life, is to take leadership in politics in some way, shape, and form, not for my own selfish needs, but to actually make a difference in the country. Whatever degree that is, or whatever level that is, who knows? That's up for God to decide where he wants to put me. But he gives me these insights. Like, for example, I was taking a shower earlier. I was in the bathroom earlier, and sure enough, that video popped up about the teachers. And God had already put that on my heart prior to, but this was just confirmation that I needed to make a video today, encouraging teachers to talk to their school board, to talk to their principals, and talk to the administration about the consideration of including some type of CSBBH program. If you truly want to know more about the positive impacts of including a comprehensive mental health, behavioral health program implemented into the school district, we need to look at what's going on in Pennsylvania right now, because they are doing an amazing job, like amazing work. And you're seeing huge differences in attendance, in school performance, in grades, in behavioral outcomes, like across the board. You're seeing major help for a lot of these school districts who were really struggling prior to implementing these and accepting these behavioral health programs to come into the school. Like, they're an outside agency, they're a mental health agency that operates then within the school district. It's like offering a safe space to kids who are really struggling with something in life. Not some flippant like drama girlfriend boyfriend thing, although we did have to work through some of those in our program, because that's just happens as kids go through puberty. But for the most part, these programs are making a huge impact on the quality of life for the teachers, for the administrators, for the kids, and for the families. And it's not easy to try to hold parents accountable. But if you do it from a loving frame of reference in a school-based behavioral health program like I was in, that I worked in for 2 years, I saw the differences that it made with the teachers and the parents and the school and the administration. Once they learned they could rely on us to help with that kid in crisis, and also the parent at home, and bridge that gap and take the load off of their back, oh man, they wanted more. They wanted to sign up everybody. And so we got inundated with too many kids at one point, and I was just stressed beyond measure, because then we had too much of a caseload and not enough workers to work with these kids. But that's what happens, is they get so excited after a while, they realize, oh my God, like the classroom is normal, like kids are paying attention in class, and oh my God, there's nobody that's being disruptive. Oh my God, like it. And teachers just loved it. They loved having that extra resource and shoulder to cry on sometimes, because there were times I would go in and I would visit with the teacher after the fact in between classes, and they were very thankful, very appreciative that we were able to come into their class and help that kid with whatever they're going through. And especially in elementary school, because we worked at both middle school and in the elementary school. There was an elementary school part of our program, and then there was a middle school and high school part. So we worked in all three phases. And the elementary school, especially for these kids who like me, who had ADHD, PTSD, all these other different types of mental health co-occurring issues. Oh my God. It dramatically increased the success of the teachers and everybody else within the building. So they loved us. They loved it. They loved having it. I mean, it wasn't always perfect. I personally struggled as the leader of that program because it was too much for me. There was too many needs and not enough workers. And I struggled to try to communicate that to the school board at the time because I felt so much pressure from the administration in my own agency to try to make things work as is, and at the same time try to tell the school no, because the school wanted more on our program, and here I was in the middle trying to be like, look, we're already overworked and understaffed. And that's why I'm saying, like, we really need to look at these programs and make sure that there's enough room to add enough staff in these mental health programs and increase the numbers of staff per student that's on their caseload. Because again, the insurance model is broken. And I've talked about this before. The insurance model is generally broken. People are not getting paid enough for what they do. And we were on call. We were on call for 24/7. We literally passed around an on-call phone. And when families were going through crisis, sometimes it was 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'd have to get up, even though I had my own 5 kids, my own family, and my own stress. And I knew I had to be in work in the next day at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning at school, whatever time it was. I still had to get up and respond to their crisis needs. There were times when I would have to actually literally drive out at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. It just, there were times where we need to obviously have a little bit more help for the helpers. There needs to also be mental health available for these teachers. And also for, if the CSBBH program goes national, which I believe it should be, and I'm going to advocate that it does. But for the people who are working every day to try to help these kids grow and learn, there needs to be more access to mental health resources like the one that I'm talking about, the CSBBH program. And I did the best job I could. I basically, like, you could say I didn't get paid for it, but I kind of did. The gratitude that I got after the fact was enough reward for me to see some of these teachers who are really struggling, who maybe wouldn't have stayed in that school district long, like further, had it not been for our program, because they were stressed out. So that's my testimony. I mean, I'm trying to stay encouraging with this message because I truly believe that we are on the precipice of a major change in our country. Although you can read in the comments of these videos that I've been talking to you about, that I reacted to today, that there's a feeling of, oh, we're going to hell in a handbasket. Don't you think that God knows what our needs are? Don't you think he already knew that the school districts in this nation was suffering and falling apart at the seams? And don't you think he knows how to fix it? I trust in God. I believe that there is a plan in place to help revive our country. And I'll keep preaching that message because I believe it, because he's shown it to me. And he gave me all these ideas to help encourage the average person that listens to this message, whether you're a teacher, a former teacher, an administrator, a mental health worker, that there's hope. And there's already solutions in place. We just need to amplify them. We need to look at them. We need to pay attention to them, and we need to advocate them to our Congress people and to our government, to our school boards, to have them pay attention to this message and start to make changes as soon as possible so that we can retain these wonderful teachers that were pouring out their life work and life energy to improve the quality of our next generation. And as a parent, of young children. I believe wholeheartedly that it is a call to all parents that giving our kids unlimited access to phones and to tablets is absolutely wrong. It's wrong. And if you don't know it, you do now. But it's wrong. These kids should not have access to these electronic devices the way that they do. So I will leave you with that message. I encourage you. I just want to say a quick prayer. Father, I thank you for this opportunity to reach out and to share this message. Lord Jesus, I just pray that your hand is on all of these teachers across the country to encourage them, to edify them, to lift them up. Father, I pray that you would increase this message and amplify it for your purpose and your power and your reasons. I pray for a revival in our country and a returning to sound doctrine. Father, I pray for these mental health programs that they would be illuminated. Schools such as Tyrone Elementary and the middle school and high school, and Blair Family Solutions, the agency that I worked at that did these mental health programs. Lord, I just pray that you would shine your light on the work that they've done to make the jobs of these schools and administrators that much better. And I also pray for the parents at home that need encouragement because they are also living in a society that's broken and struggle many times with poverty themselves. And they need purpose and they need hope to know that the investment that they're putting into their children is worth the risk. And so I just pray, Father, for your clarity. I pray that in the name of Jesus, and I rebuke any spirit, especially narcissistic spirits that would infect our society. I rebuke that in the name of Jesus, that you would come against these things and that you would illuminate the path going forward. I just pray in Jesus' name, amen. God bless you, and I will see you in the next episode.